send it to you later in case you have any questions. We're super excited that you guys can join us for our Coffee with Biz Directors and update on business recovery programs. There's been so many changes that we're really excited to give some updates on that. So we have Mike O'Connell, the Larimer SBDC Senior Director, and Kat Hart, the Loveland Business Development Program Director with us. And I am going to go ahead and let them take it away. Kat?
Great. I am going to share my screen. So we have got a presentation today that we've been giving and updating over the last several months because things have been changing so frequently. So it really is going to center around PPP EIDL. Now we've got a couple of more tools that are in our toolbox in terms of SVOG and RRF, and all the alphabet soup is so much fun to keep straight for me and Mike. Becky is going to put the link in the chat so that you can actually download this presentation. So watch for that. We'll get that in the chat a couple of times because there are a lot of clickable links in this presentation, and I hate for people to try and remember exactly what the URL is that they need to go to for some of these different programs and things like that. So to get us started, let's talk about kind of where the different packages of money have come from. Now we've had 3 large stimulus packages. The first one was last March, in March 2020. It was the CARES Act. If we take a look at what we've got here, the orangish sections are mostly direct to citizen aid. The stuff that's in the teal is kind of business aid. And then the gray sections are a little bit more generic economic development kind of aid. So aid directly to states and governments, transportation, FEMA, that kind of thing. Then we had another package that was passed in December of 2020, and this was about $900 billion. And this included a significant portion pumped into PPP. So that was like one of the biggest chunks of the December aid package, along with some more direct to citizen aid in the form of stimulus payments, unemployment, rent and food assistance, things like that. Now, the newest package that was passed just in March, March of 2021, keeping all these straight can get kind of crazy. So this was the American Recovery Plan Act. So ARPA is kind of the acronym for that. This one really focused heavily on direct to citizen aid and state and local government aid. There's not as much available for business assistance, but some of the programs that were already established through the other 2 aid packages really speak to or really have more funds available still for businesses. So there has been another couple of programs too that have been added with this latest stimulus round. So the biggest thing has been the RRF, the Restaurant Recovery Fund. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in detail if anyone has questions about that. Now, again, sticking on, where's the money and everything like that. Everyone's always curious about where's the money going, who's getting it, how much are Colorado businesses getting. So in terms of PPP loans, which we hope that many of you as business owners have already received, in 2020, Colorado businesses got about $10.4 billion. And already this year through the end of March, they've received $4.1 billion. And that $4.1 billion for the March 2021 numbers, that does include first draw and second draw loans. Also, the EIDL advances and EIDL loans are still going. The targeted advances are a little bit different. And we'll talk about that if you're not aware of what those are. And then the actual EIDL loans are available as well. So the biggest thing that's really important to look at when we're looking at these numbers is, Colorado has approximately 2% of the population and business population of the United States. And we're getting close to 2% of the funds. So we want to make sure that our business owners are getting access to the funds at the same kind of rate that, our population should justify. And we are. So that's due to the efforts of the SBDCs and the chambers and other economic development professionals that are communicating these different programs out. So when we look at the different programs that are available, this slide is fun because this one keeps kind of growing for us. We've got a whole bunch of tools that we can use to help our business owners. There's been the pandemic unemployment extension. PPP is on everyone's mind. And so there's first and second draw loans available for that. There's the EIDL loans and the EIDL advances, along with the targeted advance. There's been SBA debt relief and express loan expansions. There's the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, so that's SVOG. There's the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that's a new piece. And they've also added some pretty significant tax incentives that can be helpful for our business owners. So with all of that said, we've got some changes to unemployment that have happened. So if you are a solopreneur, you can get unemployment. If you haven't drawn it already in the past, it's definitely something that you can do. It has been extended for those 1099 employees or 1099 workers, sorry. And it's been extended another 11 weeks. So you can draw it for a total of 50 weeks. Now, Mike, do you know if that additional $300 kicker is still in place for unemployment?
Yes, I believe it is, Kat. What I was going to add, though, and you've already got it on here, in the lower right-hand corner, the real experts on this program are the Larimer County Workforce Center people. So there's a big gentleman there named Andrew Miner. He works for a guy named Adam Crow, and they're very good at answering questions for business, whether it's for your own self-employment portion or whether it's for employees that you may have. So I would encourage people, if you've got operational type questions, to contact them. And Kat, I'll also mention that with the latest American Rescue Plan, the chances are very probable that this is actually going to go out maybe all the way till September as far as unemployment insurance. So it could go a little longer here. Yep. And by the way, one other thing I will comment on about this too is you've probably read about the high amount of fraud that's going on with unemployment insurance. I would encourage you to, again, check with the Larimer County workforce people. We also have a document. I'll make sure I circulate it to this group, that was put out by the Colorado Attorney General about steps to take if you think you've been a victim of fraud, i.e. you're getting unemployment insurance notices for stuff that didn't happen or employees that are still employed. So we will get that document out because that's got some useful, although rather long, information.
And the moral of the story with that, if you've experienced unemployment fraud for yourself, is to treat it just like general identity theft from your perspective. Shut down your credit if you can and things like that. If you can prove economic damages, you can actually file a police report if you wanted to go that far. But filing a fraud report with the Colorado Department of Labor is pretty important. And then taking steps to protect your own credit and your information is important on this. So along with the actual program itself, there's been some changes to the tax side of unemployment. So normally people will have taxes taken out of their unemployment as they're drawing it so that they don't end up with a big bill at the end of the year. With the latest stimulus package, they actually included a tax credit of $10,200 for people who claimed unemployment in 2020. So it reduces your taxable income by that amount. So if you happen to be one of those really good people that was on top of things and you filed your taxes nice and early this year before that stimulus package was passed and before you could take advantage of that additional credit or reduction in income, what they're going to do for the IRS's side of things is they're going to wait until the individual deadline, which was extended to May 17th to close. And then they're going to go back and issue any additional refunds and stuff. So just keep an eye on what's going on through the IRS if you did receive unemployment for any reason, so that you can take advantage of that particular credit. And of course, if you have any questions about that, make sure you're going directly to irs.gov or the Colorado Department of Revenue's website for those kinds of questions. So the big thing of the day, and it has been for a while, has been PPP loans. So the intention of the program has always been to keep people employed with their current employer at the same staffing and pay level to keep them from being on unemployment, right? So we've had some changes to the program, a lot of changes to the program over the last year. But the biggest things to remember is that it's going to be about 2.5 times your monthly payroll. It's a 5-year, 1% forgivable loan if 60% is used for payroll and eligible expenses. The deadline to apply for it through your bank has been extended again to May 31st. And you can get a PPP loan through any SBA 7A lender. So if your bank is no longer able to issue PPP loans, you can go to the SBA's website, use their lender finder tool, and find another 7A lender that may possibly be able to offer you a PPP loan. The biggest thing with these is some of the smaller lenders have been hitting their lending caps pretty quickly. So that's why we recommend using that lender match tool if you do need to find someone who can give you a PPP loan. So the program itself has been separated out into first draw and second draw loans. So first draw loans are if you didn't get one in 2020 and you're applying for one right now, you're going to get a first draw loan. If you applied in 2020 and got one and exhausted it, and you're looking at, still getting another PPP loan, then it's going to be considered a second draw loan. So it is kind of separated into those two different pieces. And there's some slightly different qualifications for it, just very slightly between the two different draws. And as we go through this more, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. We're going to try and fly through some of this stuff so we can leave some time for questions at the end. So if some of this seems like we're kind of glossing over it, hopefully we can use that time at the end to address direct questions as well. So first draw loans, again, you're eligible if you didn't get a PPP loan in 2020. You've got 500 or fewer employees. There's a max of $10 million. Again, you're looking at 2.5 times your average monthly payroll for the amount of loan that you would be eligible for. And then there's been some set asides for some of the low to moderate income areas and the smallest of the small businesses so that they can make sure that those funds are still flowing through. Now, on the second draw loans, there's a couple of different additional requirements. So there's a revenue reduction requirement. This is the biggest thing here, is you have to show a 25% decline in comparable quarters between 2019 and 2020 to be eligible for a second draw loan. There's also some lower caps on the amount of the loan and then how many employees you can have and still be eligible for it, along with those same set asides. So if you're interested in a second draw loan, if you took one in 2020, go back to your same banker that you were working with, and hopefully they can give you some more guidance on if you would be eligible for a second draw loan. In February, there was a lot of updates that were issued to PPP. And some of those updates that are important to note is that business owners who have a non-fraud felony conviction are eligible. Business owners who may have been delinquent on student loans, and business owners who are not U.S. citizens but have a legal status can actually apply. So if you didn't apply in the past because you had one of those situations going on, you should be eligible now for a PPP loan. And there was also a new calculation that was included for self-employed, sole proprietors, and independent contractors. And they changed the calculation from going off of Schedule C's line 31, which is net income, to be based off of line 7, gross income. Now, something that I have heard from a few different clients and other business owners is that their bank is still telling them, or wherever they're trying to apply for a PPP loan, and they're a sole proprietor, is still going off that line 31. You may need to work directly with someone at your bank to tell them, no, I really need to go off of line 7, because this can be a significant difference for our sole proprietors that are looking at getting a PPP loan. So make sure you're just aware of that and you're asking those questions as you're communicating with your banker through the process of applying. Some of them, I know the portals for the lenders are still going off of the old calculation as well. And that's where you're going to need to pick up the phone and hopefully you follow our advice and you actually know who your banker is and you don't just have an 800 number, but you can actually call someone and say, hey, I need help with this specific situation. So the application forms are available online. You can take a look if you haven't applied for one yet. You can take a look at what the SBA is requiring for PPP applications on their website. So here are the actual links to it. Again, you can actually download this PDF from us and you can click through these links. So I know this is a little small on a lot of screens for what this application looks like, but just so you're aware of what your lender is likely to ask for, they may give you this direct application from the SBA, or they may have their own tool or their own portal where you're going to apply for PPP, but they're going to be collecting the same kind of information. So just so you're aware and you can be prepared for that. Mike, do you want to take over talking about forgiveness now and how you actually go through the process of forgiveness once you actually get your PPP loan?
Sure, I'll cover that. And by the way, I think Becky put in the chat, we do have a handy dandy 2-page little sheet that does cover the forgiveness process, and it largely directs you to the lender about what steps to take with the lender. They generally are handling it differently, but the first point is that you've got 10 months after you get your loan to complete the forgiveness process. So that's a pretty important part, but reach out to your lender, have your financial documents up to speed and ready. That would be your balance sheets as well as your profit and loss statements. Hang on one thing, I'm gonna grab something here. And by the way, there will be, you're going to use one of 3 forms to do the forgiveness process. Most of you probably have a PPP loan that's under $150,000, so you should be able to use the form 3508S, which is the simplified form. If you're under 150,000, you just use that form. And that relieves you of having to provide a lot of documentation, or you can basically self-certify that you've done certain things with this money. So that's a pretty important part. And what I'm referring to with the number 3508 is the SBA form. Your lender probably will have their own equivalent, but they're basically going to be asking for the same information. If your loan is more than 150,000, then you need to use either the 3508 or the 3508EZ. And there's actually some fairly complicated math depending on what's happening with your employees and their wages that determines which of those forms you use. But that I would ask your lender for, and they're going to probably help you with that decision of which one you need to use. And then, have your bank statements ready. I talked about your financials, have proof of how you spent the money, particularly on the payroll side. So you should have your payroll records. And if you can print that off of QuickBooks, that's an easy way to do that. If you use things for, say, rent payments or utility payments, have those records ready. And then primarily just work with your lender to submit that documentation, because you do have a loan with your lender. And if you don't complete the forgiveness process, you're going to continue to have a loan with the lender that you're going to have to start making payments on. So that's why it's quite important to complete the forgiveness process. And there was originally a requirement last year that said if you got an EIDL advance, this was going to be deducted from your PPP loan forgiveness, which irritated a lot of people. That was waived at the beginning of this year, so you no longer have to worry about having that deducted from your forgiveness calculation. But the main thing is work with your lender, have your documentation ready, and I think that's probably the key points on that, Kat. I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. And if you do want that, we have a wonderful 2-pager that gives a bit more detail than this particular slide. And that's available at bit.ly/SBDC-PPP-forgiveness. So if you're familiar with bit.ly links, you can type that in. If not, you can grab this presentation and click through from here, or Becky will put it in the chat, I'm sure, again, at some point. So you can get both the presentation and that 2-pager on the forgiveness and some kind of best practices tips we've put together for you. Next, we're going to move on to talking about EIDL loans. So these are economic injury disaster loans. And I've heard some really fun stuff on what these have been called, the way that people say the acronym. I always say EIDL, just it kind of makes sense. But it is a 30-year loan program through the SBA. So it's kind of for working capital expenses. It's more flexible than PPP in terms of how you can use it. It's a 3.75% interest rate loan. There's no payments due in the first year. You can get one loan per EIN per business. And they're trying to target some of those areas with the highest, with the lowest income and with the highest revenue losses. So this one you actually apply directly through the SBA at sba.gov/disaster. You can check if you're in a low to moderate income area with the tool that's listed here. The application deadline for a COVID economic injury disaster loan is December 31st of 2021. Now that may or may not be extended. We'll just kind of see all of these programs. We just want to have a giant asterisk next to everything saying dates may change, things like that, because that's what we've seen over the last year is we see these dates just kind of get pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. Some of them do and some of them don't. So don't count on it being extended, but know that that is the deadline as of right now. With the EIDL loan program, what's unique too is that this is not a new program from the SBA. This is the first time it's been used for an economic disaster as opposed to a physical disaster, or I'm sorry, a biological disaster as opposed to a physical disaster. So we also are eligible in this area for wildfire disaster loans. And these are also EIDL loans, but they are specifically due to the wildfires that we experienced last summer. Because remember, if we think back to last summer, I know it's been a long year or so, we also had the really, really bad fires of the East Troublesome Fire and others. But the eligible counties are listed here. It's the same type of loan. And there's two different loans that are actually available through the SBA for wildfire disaster assistance. So if you had actual property damage, you need to apply for a physical damage loan by April 26th of 2021. If there's economic injury because people can't get to your business because of fire damage and things like that, but you didn't actually receive physical damage, then you can do an economic injury fire loan. And that deadline is November 23rd. So just keep that in mind. With these programs, if you're not sure which one is right for you and for your business, our best piece of advice is reach out to us. We'll get you with one of our financial consultants that can kind of help you piece together what's going to be the best kind of plan of attack for your business, because every business is going to have slightly different situations that may be better suited for one tool or another. Again, remember that slide that had all of those tools. We got 7 in that toolbox at this point. So we'll help you connect to the right one. The next piece of this, along with the EIDL loan program, there was the advance program. So this was the grants. Initially, it was supposed to be $10,000 per business. Then it went down to $1,000 per employee, up to $10,000 per business. That ran out very quickly when people applied for it, because that was part of the CARES Act that was passed last March, in March 2020. And it ran out, I think, by the beginning of May. It was already out of money in that program. So with the December economic aid package, they added a targeted EIDL advance. And we've seen our businesses in the area start getting the targeted EIDL advances. And this is an email directly from the SBA that you'll get from Targeted Advance at sba.gov, inviting you to apply for the targeted advance, which is supposed to make that EIDL grant whole. So if you received $3,000 initially on the EIDL advance grant back last May, let's say, then you may be invited to apply to get the other $7,000. The biggest thing with this is do not lose this invite, because if you do lose the invite, it is a unique link to you and your business. And there is very little, if anything, that the SBA can actually do to recover it. So check your junk mail and your spam to make sure it didn't go in there. You can probably even search your email just for that actual email address of Targeted Advance at sba.gov and see if you have anything. These invitations are still rolling out. Now, initially, we were told that they were really sticking to this LMI map, the low to moderate income area map. And if we look at kind of what this map looks like, you'll see that there's kind of pockets of that dark purple. And this is what we were told, that these were the businesses that would be able to apply, as anyone that was located in those darker areas. Now, we are seeing that as this program has kind of rolled along, businesses that aren't in that dark purple area are actually getting invites from the SBA to apply, and it is legitimate. So it's probably one of those things where either the boundaries are a little bit fuzzy, or they have exhausted all of the people in the dark areas that have wanted the targeted advance, and now they're moving on to other businesses that are nearby. So if you receive that, make sure you're paying attention to it. And if you have questions about whether or not it's legitimate, we're happy to do some consulting with you to kind of take a look at whatever you've received there. Now, before we move on past PPP and EIDL, are there any questions that have come up in chat, Mike, that we need to address and maybe talk about in a little bit more detail?
Lisa asked a question that I am just getting ready to respond to. So let me finish that. Had to do, Lisa asked the question, can you apply for both the wildfire disaster as well as the COVID disaster? They're both economic injury disaster loans through the SBA. And the answer is yes. They're going to want to know the disaster declaration for each application. So you're going to need to know those numbers. And they're also going, they, meaning the SBA disaster team, is going to look at your capability to service both loans. So, and then I'm, hang on just a second, Kat. I am going up through the rest of the chat here. And Eric, I see your question. I'm going to reply to that in just a second here. Dawn asked the question, any support for new businesses that are building workforce / staffing? And Dawn, can I ask you, when did you start your business, roughly?
Just in February.
Okay. You're probably going to have some additional / extraordinary requirements based off of what you may or may not be eligible for, because you don't have a historical track record of financials to submit. So I'm not aware of any special grant programs. If that answers your question, it would definitely be, it would be a loan. Let me look into that and I'll get back to you on that. If you were thinking about applying for a PPP loan, I would check with your current bank or a bank and just see if they're going to be able to extend a PPP loan for you. That might be a little more difficult than quote normal because of the newness of your business, but I will see what I can find out.
Thanks. The challenge for me is the cost of onboarding employees, because the trainings that they have to do and the background checks and all of that. And so I would like to not have to pass those costs on to them, so I can be more successful at getting them onboarded.
Okay.
Thank
Hey, Dawn, are you connected at all with the Larimer County Workforce Center? They might possibly be aware of anything like that. They do some similar work, but.
Yeah, maybe I'll give them a call. I mean, I submitted like my job requests and that sort of thing, but I'll call them and have a more in-depth conversation. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, and then looking kind of at chat and some of the questions that are popping in. Mary said, I received an email from the SBA stating I can now request an extension on my EIDL loan, more money. They're extending it. You haven't received an email to actually apply for the advance, only for more loan money. So yes, they are offering additional funds for your EIDL loans, but extending the 6-month amount to 24 months. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. Mike, are you aware of those periods?
Yeah, I am. And Mary, yeah, you're correct. It has to do with the way the SBA is describing it. When the SBA disaster people look at a business person's loan, they're looking at the financials, and you as the business owner can ask for how much of a loan you like, but the SBA is going to loan you the amount that you think you can repay. So those two amounts may or may not match up. Now, one of the things that came out of the American Rescue Plan recently passed was that they're giving the SBA disaster office more financial flexibility. And they're saying that instead of basing these loans off of your 6 months needs, we want to extend it so that you're more able to have the service you for 24 months. And the way that translates to the business owner is we've read stuff in the paper about the max EIDL loan will now go from 150,000 to 500,000, and that's the two parts to it. So they are letting people know that, hey, you can get a loan. It is legit. They may want some more financial data. If you want to accelerate that, you can reach out to the SBA Office of Disaster Management, who's ever servicing your loan. And for most of us here in Colorado, that's an office in Texas, and try to get that ball rolling with them. But keep in mind, they are pretty overwhelmed still. Be prepared for customer service that probably isn't going to be great, but they do have money that's legit to loan. So Mary, did that answer your question or help at all?
Yes, thank you. That was good. I want to make sure it was legit, and
Yep.
yeah. Okay, they're pretty clear in the email too about how to respond to if you want to more, another loan, how to respond to it. So
Yep.
that was good. Okay, thank you so much. That was helpful.
Great. It looks like Kevin from the Fort Collins Chamber had a question on the EIDL grants.
Yeah,
what do you have?
I do. So I serve on a board. We got an EIDL grant early on, like May of 2020 or April of 2020, I think. And the bank, says they can't advise us on. I just want to check the status of that to make sure. I mean, our understanding is that it was a grant, but we really have no confirmation of that. So where do I go to get the current status on an EIDL grant from last year? And I just tried the Bitly, and it might be just old guy error, but I can't get that Bitly link to work. So, but where would I go for that information?
Hey, Kevin, you would probably go to the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. I am of the opinion that it's very unlikely anybody's going to follow up with you on the advance/grant. That was intended to be a grant. For some reason, they had to call it an advance for some federal legal reasons that I'm not totally following. But the intention was that is given to the business or the nonprofit. But if you do want to follow up and get some clarification of that, that's probably going to be a call to the SBA Office of Disaster Management, and we can get you those contact numbers.
That would be great, Mike. I'd really appreciate it.
On this slide, actually, in the lower left, the 800 number is right there, as well as their email address. So
let's see here. Which slide? Injury, disaster. Okay,
yeah,
I'm seeing the email. I'm not seeing a phone number on this. Oh, I see it. Okay, I got it. Okay,
Yep.
Thanks. That 659-2955.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot. That's what I needed.
Hey, Kevin, and one of the recommendations I'll make, I'm not completely current with this info, but you might want to try them off hours. You might have better luck reaching them than, like, say, before 7 a.m. and after 7 p.m.
Perfect. Thanks, guys. This is really informative. A great session. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kevin.
So Eric Nordman asked, what if you don't pay yourself regularly or at all as a solopreneur?
Relative to an EIDL loan or to a PPP loan application? How did you mean that?
I'm talking about a PPP loan.
Do you pay yourself through any distributions or anything like that?
So far, I generally save all of my income for more business acquisitions and live off other funds. So I don't officially pay myself. So I didn't know if that still qualified.
I don't think it's a high probability, because if you think about the intention of the PPP loan, it was to keep employees connected with their current employer. So I think that's maybe a reach for you. I would consider an EIDL loan. You know, you're going to pay a little highest interest rate, and unfortunately, it's not going to be forgivable. But that, I mean, you could try the PPP loan with your bank or a bank that's accepting PPP. I just don't think you got a real high probability of getting a yes from them, is my opinion.
So even though there's coverage for solopreneurs, you still have to show proof of paying yourself?
Kat, can you cite that line? I mean, the line 7 portion on that again, or before?
Yeah, I'll flip back over to it. So that actually, that line 7 is for how much you would qualify for. Now, in terms of how the bank's going to want it documented and everything, that's where I would recommend that you work with your banker on
Okay.
what they want to see from you. Based on what they've seen on your account in the past, they're probably going to be able to give you a really good idea of, okay, based on what you've done, this is how we would recommend that you document it. Because it sounds like that's part of what your problem is, right? How do you document that
Right.
you're kind of paying yourself for this?
Right,
Yeah.
because line 7 of the Schedule C is technically all my money. I'm just not calling it payroll.
And within the last 30 days, you know, it was recognized that the PPP loan was not real helpful to the self-employed person. And there were some, I'll call them administrative changes that the SBA made, which Kat just talked about, where the basis of how your loan opportunity was calculated was changed to a more forgiving process for the self-employed person. But you still have to get the loan from a bank and get them, private sector bank, and get them to, you know, agree with the fact that you're eligible for this. So that's kind of why, yeah, we can't say it's a slam dunk, but I can tell you that with some of the guidance that's come out recently, it in general is recognized as being more forgiving for the self-employed business person.
All right, that helps. I'll go to my bank next. Thank you.
Okay, and then Donna had a question. I know she sent this in advance. If we qualify for first and second draw PPP loans and are applying for the first time now, how long should we wait between accepting first and second draw loans? So this is specifically regarding PPP.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that if I could. And Donna, on your question, you didn't take PPP last year. I'll make the general comment that I don't think that's going to make you eligible to take 2 PPP loans this year. So you've already gone down the first draw path, and I think you're probably going to be in that certainly until the money is exhausted. That's the term they use. Have you exhausted the money? And then whether or not you're eligible for a second draw loan, that's going to be kind of a discussion with your bank. But I know you're not going to be able to have 2 PPP loans at the same time, one called first draw, one called second draw. So that's a discussion I would have with whoever your banker currently is for your first draw loan.
So can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So I applied through Smart Biz, which I believe went through the through Small Business Administration. And I was told, and I guess I'm just looking for verification. I was told that I qualified for the first and it was funded, that you could also apply for a second draw through this application process that I did. What they said was that they wanted you to wait, that you had to wait 8 to 10 weeks to exhaust that first draw prior to accepting second draw. I'm hearing stories of some people being offered second draw already without being through that 8 to 10 weeks. I was also told from the Small Business Administration, the gentleman that answered my question, that if you accept the second draw prior to exhausting that 8 to 10 weeks, you may be required to return everything. So I just was curious if you all had any updated information on that.
I'm not familiar with Smart Biz, particularly as it relates to the SBA. So I'd kind of like to do a little research on that, but
Okay.
to my knowledge, a business person is expected to exhaust the first draw money before they're eligible for second draw money. So
I totally understand that, and I
Got it.
get that part. It's the question of what is that time frame, and as you just said before, perhaps we are only eligible for one loan. So that's sort of information that I did have the 25% reduction from 1 year to the next.
okay.
So
And now,
just curious if there's any updated info on that.
I'd like to look at the Smart Biz thing, which I'll do. And the operative term from my experience is, did the business person exhaust or use the money? You don't have to have the forgiveness process done. So that's not a requirement, but you do have to have used all of the first draw money.
Understandable, totally understandable. Like I said, I just was curious if there were specific to it. So that's all. And if
Okay.
indeed we can qualify for a second draw in the same year.
Okay.
So,
So in the
Thank-
interest of time, sorry, I want to make sure that we can still get through SVOG and RRF.
absolutely, I'm out.
So we've got one quick question. I think this is a pretty simple answer on, is there a process for converting an idle loan to a grant? As far as I'm aware, there's not. Mike, you know? of any?
No,
Yeah,
there is not.
One is a loan, one is a grant. They're completely separate programs. So
If there were, we'd be shouting it from the rooftops.
I
for all
know
of you to
that
hear.
would be really exciting if we could do that. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, I'm making people dizzy with the presentation here. So shuttered venue operator grant, just so we can make sure we get through everything here. There we go. Now I'm caught up. Mike, do you want to go ahead and take shuttered venues and restaurant revitalization fund?
Kat, I'll pass. Go ahead. It's going great. So
Okay. So the shuttered venue operator grant is really intended for ticketed venues. So if your business generates revenues primarily from ticket sales, not from space rental, but specifically ticket sales. So we're talking about theaters, promoters, museums, zoos, that kind of thing. It is a grant that is available that is 29 or 45% of your 2019 revenue. So that's pretty huge for our venues that have experienced a lot of upheaval in the last year and not being able to open at all in some cases from, as early as March last year until maybe November, maybe even later than that in the year. So those venues, you can't have both the shuttered venue grant and a PPP loan received after December 27th of 2020. So if a venue applied for for PPP and got a first draw loan last year, then they would still be eligible for the SVOG. If they received a loan after a PPP loan after that December 20th or 27th date, the amount of their PPP loan is deducted from what they would be eligible for their shuttered venue grant. You do have to show the revenue reduction with that. You do have to be registered through the System for Award Management, SAM system, so sam.gov. And so we do have some kind of guidelines on how to apply for this. Now, as far as we knew, the application for this was supposed to open today, April 8th of 2021. You'll notice we've got an asterisk there. Application portal dates are subject to change. So with all of the programs, that's kind of how it's going right now. But some of the steps, if you are a shuttered venue, that you can take to see if you're eligible. First, check your eligibility and read the FAQs on the SBA's website. Sign up for a DUNS number, sign up for a SAM number, and create those profiles so that when that portal is all the way ready, I didn't check it this morning to see if the SBA's portal for SVOG is open, and gather up your financials so that you can be ready to apply. There's some calculation information too on the number of employees and things like that, just to get you prepared. And we've been sharing this graphic out on social media and stuff too. But this is really kind of a handy checklist of how to go about applying for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant. Check time. Okay, and so next we've got this is a big piece of what the ARPA, funds that were passed in March included the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. And this is similar but not the same as the SVOG. It's support for the hardest hit restaurants and bars based on lost revenue. According to the guidelines that we saw on the SBA's website, it is expanded to include food stands, food trucks, caterers, brew pubs, tasting rooms, all kinds of restaurant related businesses. There's about $28 billion in grants available, with $5 billion set aside for businesses that have less than 500,000 in 2019 revenue. So those were either newer businesses or the smallest of restaurants. One of the big requirements is you can't be publicly traded or government owned. So like a cafe that's owned by the city that's inside of like the city's museum wouldn't necessarily be eligible if it's owned by the city. It is a grant fund that is the 2019 revenue minus the 2020 revenue less your PPP. So that is included in the amount that you could possibly get if you are a restaurant owner for this particular grant. The covered periods have been extended. So this is another one of those shifting things, right? The reason we're updating this presentation so regularly is because all of these dates are shifting. So the covered period for the grant is from February 15th of 2020 through early 2023. That final date is still shifting. Initially, it was only through, I think, the end of 2021. So again, these programs are, living and breathing and changing as we kind of learn more about them and go through them. Right now, initially, there was supposed to be a requirement that the restaurants had to have a DUNS and a SAMS number. This is no longer required to apply for this. This is going to be handled through an SBA group, a different SBA group than the Shuttered Venues Operator Grant. The application is still pending, but some of those allowed uses for restaurants for this particular grant. Really, it's pretty much anything that's going to keep your restaurant alive. So payroll, utilities, maintenance. One of the exciting things that I saw when I was digging into some of the allowed uses was this includes, you can use this grant for new outdoor seating construction. So a lot of our restaurants have had to expand outdoor seating areas, and they can actually use this grant to improve those outdoor seating areas. Maybe even so that by next winter they can have more outdoor seating, and especially here in Colorado, we get some nice heaters and stuff like that, and we don't have to have those little tents the same way we did this winter, and they can have something a little bit more substantial. So really it comes down to any other expense the SBA says is essential for a restaurant to maintain their operations. So this is pretty huge for our restaurants, and we're excited to get this out for them and to see them start applying for it. In terms of what you can do to get ready for it, it's going to be pretty much the same as that SVOG minus the SAMs and DUNS stuff. You're going to gather your financials. You're going to just get everything in line so that when the application does open up, you're ready to apply. Mike, is there anything else that we should add on to this?
Yes, there is, Kat, and I will just put this out there without knowing what the implications of it are yet. But this restaurant fund, it is not being managed by the SBA's Office of Disaster Assistance, which is used to dealing with small businesses. We found out a couple of weeks ago it's going to be managed through the SBA's Office of Capital Assistance. So I don't quite know what that means. I don't know their ability to deal with businesses. We don't quite know what the applications are going to look like yet at this point, but so that's an unknown. So we will try to keep you posted to the best of our ability what the pros and cons of that are.
Right. So moving beyond that, SBA debt relief. This was another one of those buckets. So this includes our 7A and 504 loans that we see a lot of business owners that have. The principal and interest was paid for 6 months in 2020. You didn't have to do anything to take advantage of this program. It was just done between the SBA and your bank. They took care of it. In 2021, it's going to be paid for 2 months. Certain new SBA loans taken out between February and September of 2020 will be eligible for 3 months worth of payments. So that's all good news as well for businesses that are taking out those particular loans. Maybe they weren't eligible for PPP and they weren't eligible for EIDL, so they went for a 7A loan or something like that. This is just another tool in that toolbox to help. Also keep in mind that for disaster loans, current disaster loans, payments are deferred. It's been extended a couple of times. Generally, an EIDL loan, you don't have to pay for the first 12 months on. So we're just kind of seeing, again, those dates are getting pushed out further and further on this.
Hey, Kat, I will say the woman that was on the call that has the new staffing company, that second blurb, if you can get an SBA 7A loan, and they will pay the principal and interest for 3 months. It's not deferred, they're paying it for you. That's a pretty nice kicker. So that's worth looking into. And you're right in that time period where if you can get that loan, this is part of the SBA's impetus to keep money flowing through the economy and keep new loans coming in. So that's a nice benefit.
Okay. The next stuff, Mike, you're definitely going to take this stuff. So the tax improvements. I know we're getting kind of close on time and everything. So dig in.
And I'll cover this pretty quickly. The first thing I already mentioned, one of the changes that happened at the beginning of this year was that the EIDL advance or grant is not counted against your PPP forgiveness. So that was a nice relief. And 2020 deductions, that if you had that deducted, that is being remitted from the federal government to your lender. So the lender is supposed to make you whole, Mr. Business Person, if you had that, if you've already done the forgiveness and had that taken out. So be aware of that. One of the other things in the second bullet was there was a lot of inconsistencies between the intent of this program and what the IRS was still saying. So you had business expenses that were supposed to be used to achieve PPP forgiveness, but the IRS was saying, yeah, you're still going to get taxed on all that. You can't use it then as a normal tax deduction, which kind of defeated the purpose of the PPP part. So that got collaborated and fixed at the beginning of this year, which is going to make life easier for a lot of small business people and accountants. The EIDL advance is not taxable. That was another change this year. And then as Kat shows here, the individual filing deadline, which is normally, I believe, April 15th, that was extended a month to May 17th. So those were some pretty big tax parts. Again, I'm not an expert on tax, but if you've got accountants, that they should be aware of this. And the next part, I talked about that, Kat talked about that debt relief portion where the SBA might be paying some of your existing SBA loans. That is taxable. You will get an income form for that payment of the P&I. So a little bit of bad news on that, but overall some good news. And then again, contact your accountant if you've got any questions. There were some significant changes made to the employee retention tax credits. And last year, if you were a PPP loan recipient, you couldn't apply for the employee retention tax credit. Now you can. And they have made it easier. I'm not going to go through all the detail, but in the past, you had to show a 50% revenue decrease. That's been changed to 20%, so more businesses are eligible. And the way the credit worked, it was based off of your wages paid, and it was based in the past on 50% of your wages paid. That was loosened up to now 70%. So more businesses eligible, more wages eligible for the tax credit. Overall, a good thing for the small business person.
And the biggest thing with all of this is, we've said it a few times, make sure you're communicating regularly with your accountant and your banker. They're your best friends right now, and they should be your best friends. Like, you should know who these people are and be able to call them and ask some of these questions. Some of the information we gave on those tax credits, Really what we want to give you enough information is so that you can go to your accountant and say, hey, I heard about this employee retention tax credit. I don't know what it means for my business. Help me out here. And they're going to know all the granular detail and how it applies to your situation. But it's about keeping in communication with them. With the PPP loans, same thing, right? We want to give you enough information so that you can go to your banker and say, hey, I heard something about a different calculation for sole proprietors. Do I qualify? And your banker will be able to say, okay, given your situation, we can help you in this way. So our general recommendations that we're always going to give you is gather up your key documents. This is huge for our businesses, right? Because I saw here in Loveland, there was a loan program or a grant program that was approved by City Council the second week of December on a Tuesday night. The city had the application up by the following Friday, and it closed 3 weeks later. And that gave us only 3 weeks to communicate out that, hey, there's this grant program available for Loveland businesses. The people who had their financials in line or already had those documents ready were able to apply. That's a really short window for us to be able to market and communicate a grant program, but that's how fast some of this stuff is rolling out. So having your financial documents ready means you're not going to miss some of those things that are coming out. And if you paid attention to, how these programs are breaking down, this last round of stimulus had a huge chunk that was going to local state governments. And so these programs are going to start rolling out quickly. You don't want to miss a deadline just because you don't have your financials together. Talk to your banker, talk to your accountant, keep in touch with your local chamber, economic development group. You're already here with the SBDC and LBDC. So it's a good place to stay plugged in. Follow up on those EIDL advances. Keep good records how you're spending any of this money, and keep in mind some of those application deadlines. Now, Mike, I know we're just about here at time, but if there's any additional questions, we want to respect everyone's time. But I know I can stay on the call a little bit longer, but that's the crux of the presentation there. Reach out to us and connect with us if you have more specific questions and you're out of time today.
Yeah, and Kat, marvelously covered. The only thing that I will emphasize is there is just a lot of information that's coming at the small business owner right now, so you don't want to miss stuff. That's why we're encouraging people, keep in touch with your chambers of commerce. We got Kevin Jones from the Fort Collins Chamber, Bill Becker from the Loveland Chamber on this call, but they're always putting out information on resources. And as Kat mentioned, a lot of them have pretty tight deadlines. Every municipality that I deal with in the county, they've got an economic health person. So some of these programs are going to open and close pretty quick, and you want to make sure you're in the know and applying for them. And then there's resources within these organizations that can help you with that process. So that's all I had, Kat.
Yeah. So if there's any other questions that anyone wants answered and you're willing to stay on the call, let's go ahead and start answering some of those. Or if you're ready to get on with your day, I know I'm out of coffee, so I just ran out. It's perfect timing. Okay, it looks like we probably got everything answered. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day, and let us know if there's anything we can do to help your business.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And just so you know, I will be sending this recording to you so you have it as well. You should be receiving it just around noon.
Thanks again.